why did the devastating war between the Kauravas and the Pandavas actually happen? If you look back at this legendary ancient conflict from the Mahabharata, it's incredibly tempting to say, well, it was just a political dispute over land, power, or kingdom boundaries, right? But the philosophical text we're exploring today asks us to look quite a bit deeper. The root cause wasn't territory at all. The war happened simply because the Kauravas saw the Pandavas as entirely separate from themselves, and the Pandavas saw the Kauravas as other. It was quite literally the fatal illusion of separation.
Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a really profound ancient text about the expansion of ego. Let's analyze this thought together. We're going to take a pretty fascinating journey, mapping how ancient wisdom regarding human psychology directly dictates our very modern survival. Seriously, if you've ever wondered why society feels so deeply fractured right now, this text provides a razor-sharp, totally logical answer.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our roadmap for this explainer is pretty straightforward. 1. The root of unrest. 2. The illusion of I and you. 3. Our selfishness, our destruction. 4. The collective good of society. And finally, number 5, the expansion of ego.
Section 1. The root of unrest. Society's deepest problem.
The source material makes a really bold claim right out of the gate. It argues that every single dispute in the world, whether we're talking about an ancient mythological war, a modern political crisis, an ethnic clash, or honestly just a bitter personal argument with your neighbor, stems from one single identifiable root cause. The text defines this root problem as ahambhav sankoch, the contracted ego. This happens when you shrink your identity down to just your physical body and your immediate circle, seeing yourself as completely separate from everyone. Because I think of you as separate from me, I view you as alien, and I don't love you. This contraction is literally the mother of all earthly unrest. So what's the fix? Well, it's ahambhav prasar, the expanded ego. This means stretching your sense of self until you see your own reflection in all living beings. Expanding your ego and destroying your selfish ego are, practically speaking, the exact same thing.
Section 2. The illusion of I and you. The grammar of separation.
Now, the author doesn't just ask us to take this idea on faith. They actually prove logically why the concept of being entirely separate is really just a linguistic trick we play on ourselves. And this brilliantly illustrates the point. Just imagine 3 people standing together having a conversation. The first person speaking calls himself I, calls the person listening you, and calls the third person he. Right? Makes sense. But the second person opens their mouth to reply, and bam! The roles rotate. Now the second person is I, the first person becomes you, and the third remains he. And when that third person speaks, they become the I. I, you, and he are just rotating completely meaningless labels. They're pronouns we've memorized, but we've totally failed to realize that structurally, there is absolutely no difference between the I of the first person and the I of the third person. It's the exact same underlying consciousness wearing different grammatical masks.
And this grammatical truth is beautifully backed up by scriptural authority. The text quotes this powerful verse, noting that a truly wise person, a yogi whose mind is perfectly balanced, actually sees the self in all beings and all beings in the self. Fundamentally, this whole idea of separation between me and you is just born from ignorance.
Section 3. Our selfishness, our destruction. The real-world cost of contracted ego.
Now, what's really interesting here is how we move from high philosophy straight into gritty reality. The text explains how this contracted ego literally gets people killed. You might be sitting there thinking, okay, well, that's a nice thought, but I live in the real world. Well, imagine a wealthy man and a poor man living nearby. The wealthy man catches cholera. He calls the doctors, gets the absolute best medicine, and boom, he's cured. Then the poor man catches the plague or cholera, but no doctors come. The rich neighbor just ignores him, totally disconnected from his suffering. So the poor man dies unhelped. But here is the brutal reality of the situation. The disease spreads from the uncremated body of the poor man, infecting the whole neighborhood and eventually wiping out the rich man's entire village anyway. The wealthy man thought he could abandon his poor neighbor, but he obviously couldn't abandon the poison of the disease. If he had just treated the poor man as his own, getting him medical help or at least a proper cremation, the entire disaster could have been prevented. Selfishness here is practically a suicide mission.
The text summarizes this reality with an incredibly potent proverb. He who protects others is protected himself. Saving a sick neighbor isn't about charity, right? It's not about just being a nice person. It is an act of absolute self-preservation. You can only be truly healthy if you ensure those around you are healthy.
Section 4. the collective good of society, wealth, crime, and education.
Zooming out even further, this ripple effect of disease isn't just about biology. It applies to money, crime, and the very fabric of our society. Think about wealth and education for a second. If you hoard your wealth, completely blind to the starving neighbors around you, that desperation breeds crime. When robbers eventually take everything you have, whose fault is it? Well, the text argues the fault is originally yours for not utilizing your resources to lift up your community. It's the same thing with education. You might educate your own child brilliantly, but if you ignore your neighbor's uneducated, ignored child, eventually that child will negatively influence yours. You literally cannot maintain a pristine life in a vacuum. And as we've seen globally, a new disease in Europe or America becomes a worldwide plague in a matter of days. We are connected, whether we want to admit it or not.
The source text offers a fascinating, impartial sociological observation on this dynamic, contrasting ancient Indian traditions with Western societal struggles. It notes that historically, the ancient tradition of freely sharing knowledge and wealth as a core duty created profound societal peace. In contrast, it observes that in the West, the misuse and hoarding of wealth by the upper classes inevitably birthed massive social unrest, fueling socialist and nihilist movements. The text neutrally emphasizes what is basically a law of physics and society. Hoarding resources creates explosive friction. If you don't share the nectar of knowledge to elevate people, you really can't act surprised when society breaks down around you.
Section 5. The expansion of ego. Breaking down disgust and separation.
Here, the text focuses heavily on breaking down the barriers of disgust, specifically looking at how we judge the absolute most vulnerable people in society. The author firmly challenges our hypocrisy with a profoundly uncomfortable example. Let's be real. If our own sick child soils our clothes or our bed, we clean it up without a split second of hesitation. We might even feel joy in caring for them. We feel absolutely no disgust. But if a sweeper, someone historically deemed an untouchable, or a person suffering from leprosy approaches us, we suddenly feel this intense, unbearable disgust. But why? It's the exact same bodily mess, the exact same biology. Why on earth does one evoke pure love and the other evoke pure revulsion?
So the crucial point is that this completely dismantles the logic of social division. Step 1. Acknowledge that disgust isn't actually about physical dirt. I mean, if a sweeper washes their hands, they are just as physically clean as you are. Step 2. Realize that the feeling of disgust comes strictly from your contracted ego, from labeling them as other, separate, or distant from your own I. You aren't disgusted by the disease, you are just hoarding your ego. Ultimately, true expansion of the ego means looking at a stranger's wounds and treating them with the exact same urgency and lack of disgust as you would treat a wound on your own arm.
The text points to this famous instruction from the Bhagavad Gita: abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. In the context of this explainer, abandoning varieties of religion means abandoning our rigid, selfish, contracted egos. Giving up our endless categorization of what is mine and what is theirs is the ultimate path to both personal spiritual liberation and true, lasting societal harmony.
This ancient text leaves us with a profound challenge that bridges high philosophy and everyday survival. Because expanding your ego isn't just about attaining enlightenment. It's literally about making sure the world doesn't burn down around you. So I'll leave you with this. Look at the very next stranger you meet today. Are they truly separate from you, or are they just another expression of I? Think about it.